All right, so earlier we mentioned how, the zeitgeist is the spirit of the times, and that spirit isn't, made by some type of magic or whatever, but it's made by the consistent progress of human thought, right? Our ethics, our morality, the way that we view the world, even technology to everything else, this is what kind of allows the zeitgeist to be different than what it was in the past. But what we didn't discuss is the fuel that drives the zeitgeist, right? Because the zeitgeist, like I said, it's the spirit of the time. Just imagine a zeitgeist as being like when you go to a museum and you see like Washington crossing the Delaware. That is a painting of the zeitgeist of the moment, right? But what fuels it? Because a zeitgeist has to evolve, it has to change. And that fuel is what Hegel calls the dialectic, all right? And just so you know, the dialectic, and I'm going to have to draw it out because it does require a diagram to understand. But the goal of the dialectic, much like the zeitgeist, is to overcome the divisions that separate us. It's designed to not necessarily erase or vilify or to make something heavenly and spiritually good. It's nothing like that. The goal of the dialectic, as Hegel says, is to overcome the negatives. Like if you got two competing ideas, the reason they're competing is because there's something negative inherent to each idea that causes the ideas to disagree with one another. So how do we get over that, right? The dialectic doesn't seek to erase the competing ideas. Oh no, that would be too easy. The goal of the dialectic is to transcend the two competing ideas and create something magnificent, to create something better. Imagine it's like sex, right? The dialectic is like man, woman. When they're separate, they're just two individuals. But when they get together and have them a little dialectic, well, they produce something else, right? 1 + 1 = 3. And that's kind of what the dialectic is. But the problem is, well, not the problem, but what happens is, well, when you got these two competing ideas, and then you transcend those two competing ideas to create a new one, well, that new idea is also going to give birth to an opposing idea. So we got to figure out how that happens and why that's an actual good thing, all right? The dialectic is made of, well, there's actually 4 steps that you need to know for the dialectic, all right? Here they are. And obviously, you got to know this stuff for the exam. The dialectic is composed, first of all, of something called the thesis, right? Just like in an English class, thesis, all right? Now, a thesis is any original position, any original belief that you come into an argument or you come into a situation and you just automatically hold it true to yourself. Like, this is what I believe. This is who I am, right? Or like if you're in academia, you could say the thesis is that the Earth is the center of the solar system, right? That's the thesis, the original position. Well, just like a God and a devil, just like a 1 and a -1, just like Air Force and Army, you're always going to have something opposite, right? The opposite, and it's, well, for now, the opposite is called the antithesis, right? Or you can pronounce it antithesis. However, if you say antithesis, it makes it kind of sound like a rube, but if you say antithesis, people will respect you more. But it's up to you. But the antithesis, right? Obviously, the easy way to think about it is that it's the opposite of the thesis. But that's not necessarily true. The antithesis is like, what the fuck? Oh, hey, pussycat. The antithesis is almost like saying, if I believe in the idea that calculus can determine every movement and every engineering building in the world, I can use calculus to do that, right? That could be a thesis statement. But then you got a cat named Einstein, right? Einstein comes about and says, calculus is good. Calculus does work on Earth. But when we go into space, all of a sudden calculus is kind of worthless, right? It's worthless because it only works in the context of Earth. So we got to create something new. We're going to take some of the core fundamentals of calculus, but we have to make it adapt so that the math can work in space, and Einstein created general relativity, right? That could be considered an antithesis. It doesn't mean the thesis is wrong. It just means that part of it works, some part of it doesn't work, all right? And so if we go out of the realm of math, because I know math can be boring, a good thesis antithesis is, let's say, America and England, okay? The original position, the thesis, was the British monarchy, right? King George knows all. British people know everything. We are judge, jury, and executioner, and you in America are going to follow our rules. Okay, that worked for a time. But then these guys in wigs, these presumptuous, arrogant, intelligent folks like Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, you know, these brilliant men, said, this really doesn't work for us. But there are some things that do work, right? So what we did is America turned into the antithesis to England's thesis. Needless to say, a war happened. But the result of that war created the third part of the dialectic, which is called the synthesis, right? Like synthesize, right? Synthesis. So to give you a diagram, right? To kind of show you what he means by this, because sometimes just explaining in abstract terms doesn't work. So you start here, thesis, right? We start here with the thesis. Well, then you got people who disagree with you, right? Or if they don't disagree with you, maybe they just find a better way. And that creates the antithesis, right? But that's not enough, because if you allow these divisions to continue and exist, you're gonna get war, or you're gonna get massive amounts of hatred. So Hegel said, there's got to be something to be done. There's got to be something to synthesize what works in the thesis and what works in the antithesis. But we got to get rid of the shit that just doesn't work. That process is called sublation, if you can see that, right? So it's like a pyramid. And at the top, you have the synthesis, okay? That's the final step, right? So let me draw that here. So just so you can see in this crude drawing, right? You got England, the thesis. Then you got America over here who says, look, we don't like this idea of taxation without representation. So we did not seek sublation. We sought to just be two independent things. We wanted that division. We wanted that internal contradiction to exist, and we got war. But now what sublation does, sublation, on the other hand, is think of your yin-yang, right? Remember, no black and white in yin-yang. When they're in movement, when they're dancing that tango together, they create gray, right? They create a synthesis of what works for both. So Hegel says, sublation is when you cannibalize the good parts of the thesis, the good parts of the antithesis, and then throw all the stuff that doesn't work in the trash because it doesn't work. This is how history progresses. So through sublation, it's like let me draw you another picture. Sublation is like, it's like a Venn diagram, okay? Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. It's like you got this, Venn diagram. You got these people over here who believe in the thesis. You got these people over here who believe in an antithesis. But Hegel says these are garbage. What we seek is right here in the middle, common ground. This is the synthesis. Oh, wow, that looks like something sexual. Forget that part, but you get the point, right? Like, the synthesis is kind of the best of both worlds. And that dialectic is what drives the zeitgeist. How? Because here's what happens. Just like in this diagram, right? Where, hold on, let me see. Okay, where you got the thesis, antithesis, and you see how through sublation you get a synthesis. Well, guess what? People aren't going to quit arguing. People aren't going to quit changing. People are always going to change. So what happens? That synthesis, all it does, that synthesis is going to create a new antithesis. It's going to say that synthesis works. It works now. But people change. And if people change, well, a natural antithesis is going to grow out of it. But then it begins again. That antithesis is going to require another act of sublation, and then you're going to get another synthesis, right? And see, sublation creates a new antithesis, which requires more sublation, which will create a new synthesis. And guess what? The process is going to keep going and going and going and going. And that's what Hegel meant by once this dialectic has reached its end, once humans have found, I guess, ideally like this perfect society, that's the end of history. History ends when there's no longer a need for a dialectic. Personally, that's never going to happen. As long as people view it and have different perspectives, this dialogue will continue indefinitely, eternally, as long as we exist. But let's be optimistic here and say one day, maybe we will find the golden pasture. So the big things you have to know about the dialectic is how it works. What is a thesis? How does that breed an antithesis? How do those two combined require sublation to reach a synthesis, only for the whole damn process to start over again? But that ain't a bad thing, because the more the process continues, the stronger and the better our society will become. You can apply this dialectic to not just human communication, to politics. This, folks, this is how science works as well. This is our hypothesis. We test it. If it doesn't work, we get rid of the experiment that doesn't, the variables of the experiment that don't work. We create a synthesis, which is the medicine. But guess what? That medicine has side effects. So now we need the dialectic again, an antithesis, to get rid of the side effects so we can create a better medication. The dialectic exists in every damn thing in our reality. Why? Because we make our reality. And that's why I've been saying at the beginning of the semester, this is why human beings are the lords of our own creation. And the minute you begin to accept that, the more empowered you will become. Damn, I got kind of excited when I said that. And is that it? Sublation, absolute knowledge. And that's it. That's Hegel. That's our first German philosopher. All right. We only got 2 philosophers left, and both are also German. And as you can tell, these German philosophers are they think very mechanistically. Like they're very there's a reason why they're the best engineers in the world, because all of it's about precision. Yeah, they did start 2 world wars. Okay, fine. But their philosophies and their work, second to none. Second to none. All right, folks, I think I'm about done. So if you got any questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, remember that, I'm going to delete this video 24 hours before the exam closes. So make sure you take notes. Don't try to memorize this stuff, because we saw what happened on the last exam when you didn't take notes. All right? Until then, may the force be with you. I don't know, some shit like that.